So imagine this. It's New Year's Eve in Moscow in 1975. You are at a banya, which is a traditional bathhouse, with your best friends. And as usual, toasts are flowing and you are getting hammered. Do you take one toast for New Year, one for your upcoming marriage, one for old times, and then, as usual, you pass out. The next thing you know, your friends have bundled you into a plane. You wake up and you don't know where you are, and disoriented and in what you think is your apartment building. You stumble to your door, your key fits the lock, and you collapse into your bed. But the thing is, you're not really in Moscow anymore. You are in Leningrad, in a complete stranger's apartment that just happens to have the same exact address, the same layout, and the same state-issued key as yours. This is plot of one of the most beloved Soviet films of all time, which is called The Irony of Fate. And it kind of seems to confirm every stereotype that we have about Russians, drinking and vodka. In fact, this film was so influential in its portrayal of drinking that it was actually banned during Gorbachev's anti-alcohol campaign, because it was seen as promoting drunkenness. You know, that single act provides the perfect transition from the cultural aspect of drinking to the political actions that form the core of our story today. Our story today isn't just really about drinking. It is about a substance. It is about vodka that seeped into every imperfection of the Soviet system. It became a social ritual, it became a political weapon, and it became a currency that was more stable than the ruble. This is how vodka defined, supported, and ultimately ruined the Soviet Union. Chapter 1: The Spirit in the Machine. To understand how vodka could ruin a superpower, you first have to understand that the state itself was the biggest addict. Not really to drinking, but to the money it made from vodka. For centuries, Russian leaders had used a state monopoly on alcohol to fill their coffers. The Soviets perfected this system, making it a fundamental pillar of the economy. In 1979, for example, the state made more money from alcohol taxes, 25 billion rubles, than it did from collecting income tax from its citizens. But there was a paradox there, because there was a constant push to discourage drinking, because the state itself recognized its worst effects, because the Soviets did drink, and they drank a lot. In the Soviet Union, drinking wasn't just a hobby. For many men, it was a part of their job. It was the glue that held this work brigade or collective together. In the all-male environment of these factories and blue-collar workplaces, bonding with workmates through heavy drinking was just unavoidable. It was an essential part of a young man's life. I mean, a shared drink became a sign of mutual respect. It was a way to affirm that you are a comrade and you are a friend in a system that offered very few other outlets. There is research from this era that finds out that 20% of Russians reported drinking at work. A figure that, if you compare it with the neighboring Finland, was just 2%. And the thing is that it had very stark effects. As early as the 1970s, it was estimated that alcohol abuse was reducing the country's overall labor productivity by about 10%. By the mid-1980s, as drinking levels continued to rise, that figure estimated to have climbed as high as 17%. In fact, anecdotally, it was known that productivity on Mondays will be poor automatically because binge drinking starts Friday evening and continues over the whole weekend. And this means workforce would be either absent or non-productive on Mondays. And they were actually called Black Mondays. So yeah, the state was addicted, the people were addicted, but that didn't stop the state from trying. As unimaginable as it sounds, we see constant campaigns in the form of posters through the entire history of the Soviet Union. For example, this poster from 1930 asks people to smash alcohol, describing it as the enemy of the Cultural Revolution. Or check out this poster from 1958, where two pigs are looking at a drunkard passed out, and they're joking that they say we are the pigs. Or this horrific poster that shows a woman loving or hugging a bottle of wine with a kid just saying that I'm not the one that my mom loves. So yeah, there was a clear paradox. But it gets even worse than that, because in the Soviet planned economy, there was a constant shortage of consumer goods. This created a dangerous problem. Citizens had cash, but they had no way to spend it. State-produced alcohol, it was always available. It acted as a giant economic sponge. It soaked up all this excess money, balanced the budget, and sort of prevented runaway inflation. It was sort of like a stopgap for a broken market where a bottle of vodka acted as a more stable form of currency, and it was a stable unit of exchange for almost everything. Do you need a plumber? A bottle would work. A favor from an official? A bottle would work. This problem got so much worse, especially near the end of the Soviet Union, because there was this Moscow laboratory clerk who said in an interview that he has 20 bottles of vodka stashed away in his apartment and he doesn't drink at all. And this culture of drinking went right to the top leadership. So imagine this. You are a high-ranking official in the Kremlin. So you have been invited to a private dinner at your boss's dacha, Stalin, of course. And this isn't really an honor. It's actually a terrifying test. Stalin, who himself drank very little, would force his inner circle into these marathon drinking sessions. In 1948, there was a Yugoslav politician who witnessed one of Stalin's drinking games. Guests actually had to guess the temperature outside, and for every degree that you were off, you had to down a glass of vodka. The secret police chief, Leventy Beria, missed by 3 degrees, and it was noted that he said that he just did it on purpose to get more to drink. The problem was big, and the problem was bad. And this brings us to chapter 2. When Gorbachev came to power in 1985, he saw rampant alcoholism not as a financial solution, but as a scourge that was crippling productivity, public health, and the social fabric. Just 2 months after becoming the general secretary, he launched the most ambitious anti-alcohol campaign in the Soviet history. The state declared war on the bottle. The measures were swift, they were severe, and they were sweeping. The state production of vodka was slashed by up to 40%, and the number of stores selling alcohol was reduced by 5-fold. Sales were restricted to a 5-hour window between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. And the price of vodka, the luxury of the masses, more than doubled. Centuries-old vineyards in Georgia and Moldova and Crimea were literally torn out of the ground. And for a moment, it seemed to work. The initial results were staggering. Overall mortality rates plummeted. Male life expectancy jumped by nearly 3 years, which was the most significant increase in the country's history. But this was deceptive calm before the storm. By attacking the symptoms with a sledgehammer, Gorbachev failed to understand the disease. He was attacking the very substance that was plugging all the holes in his country. The great sobering up was about to turn into a national nightmare. Chapter 3, The Crash and Burn. So the campaign's failure unfolded in 3 devastating acts. There was an economic death blow, a public health disaster, and the rise of a new criminal underworld. First, the economic implosion. By turning off the tap of the drunken budget, Gorbachev bankrupted the state. In 1986 alone, government income from alcohol plummeted by a quarter. The total loss was tens of billions of rubles. This catastrophic loss of revenue unluckily happened at the exact same time that the global oil prices collapsed, wiping out the USSR's other main source of income. The Soviet economy went into a free fall, and to cover the deficit, the government forced to print money, fueling massive inflation and then debt. Soviet people saw their savings evaporate right in front of their eyes. But it didn't even stop the people from drinking. It just drove it more underground. The entire country went into the moonshine business. The scale was immense. An estimated 1 million tons of sugar were diverted from the nation's food supply so that they can be used to create moonshine. And this created a national sugar shortage. For those who couldn't really make their own alcohol, the moonshine, the desperation was terrifying. There was a new wave of deaths from people from toxic surrogates. People drank cologne, people drank aftershave and window cleaners. There were stories of men lining up on train stations to drink from this perfume spray dispensers that dispensed perfume after every half an hour or so. One of the most infamous methods involved a specific type of industrial glue that contained alcohol along with poisonous binders. Engineers and factory workers developed a technique. They would insert a power drill into a can of the glue and run it for a while. This motion would cause the poisonous glue to separate and encrust the drill bit, leaving behind a layer of drinkable, almost very foul alcohol. The others used the Russian winter to their advantage. There were industrial solvents which were, deadly to ingest. They could be poured onto a piece of steel in the freezing cold. The non-ethanol components would freeze to the metal, allowing the pure liquid alcohol to be scraped off and consumed. Even everyday household items became sources of alcohol. Toothpaste containing ethanol was spread on a slice of bread, and after the alcohol soaked into the bread, the dried paste was scraped off and the alcohol infused slice could be eaten. The result of this widespread consumption of surrogates was a public health catastrophe. The campaign had initially lowered deaths from official alcohol. It created new and horrifying wave of mass poisonings that killed thousands, completely erasing the earlier gains. Gorbachev himself later admitted that the campaign was a mistake. He said we should not have shut down trade. He said that everything should have been done gradually. He recalled traveling the country and said that women supported me everywhere where I went, but men did the opposite. The picture was clear. The displeasure from the male population, the panic from his own finance ministers, and the chaos erupting across the country created a perfect storm of opposition. But the story doesn't end with the campaign's quiet surrender in 1988, or even with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Its true devastating legacy was yet to come. This collapse of the campaign led directly to what demographers called the Russian mortality crisis of the 1990s. When the Soviet Union fell, the state alcohol monopoly was abandoned. It wasn't replaced with regulation, but with a complete free-for-all, illicit and low-quality toxic alcohol that just flooded the newly open market. Regulations are good sometimes, and the state monopoly, and sometimes, you see what it caused. The alcohol consumption and alcohol-related deaths, it got to even new levels and heights that was before the campaign, particularly among working-age men. There are some studies that estimate that aftershock of the campaign's demise explains up to half of the entire mortality crisis. The very policy that was designed to save lives ultimately contributed to a demographic catastrophe. The anti-alcohol campaign was just like a microcosm of this perestroika's fatal flaw. It was a top-down authoritarian reform that completely misunderstood the complex and informal systems that people helped build to survive. It was the same thing. It was like attacking the symptom of drunkenness with a sledgehammer without any regard to everything that was preceding itself. The liquid currency, the social bonding, the budget revenue, that were all holding this broken country together. The story of vodka in the Soviet Union is a powerful reminder that the things society uses to cope are often deeply connected to the things that cause it pain. But before I leave, I want to put on this question to you. Alcohol seriously has many problems, even in the Western world. And somehow, for some reason, maybe it is because of the fact that it generates so much capital and revenue, it is tolerated. But the fact that it contributes to so many ills in the society makes me think that if the capital incentive wasn't there, people, governments would not tolerate it. But that is just my opinion. I want to know what you think. Do you think alcohol is more beneficial for the society, or it should be curbed? Or what do you think? Let me know your opinion down in the comments. And if you have any more suggestions for topics or videos that I should cover, honestly, then write down to my email down in the description. I will see you in the next one. Bye.